specifically if you were born in 1959. And we've also got the early projections for the 2026 cost of living adjustment, the COA.
So quite a bit to unpack. Where should we start?
Let's jump into that Republican spending bill first. It's pretty fresh, right, from the House Ways and Means Committee.
Exactly. Just released. And, well, the big headline for a lot of folks is the $4 trillion proposed increase to the debt ceiling.
Okay.
But there's other stuff tucked in there, too, like extending some of those Trump-era tax cuts and some new breaks, things for tips, overtime pay, even car loans.
What really caught my eye, though, especially after, all the talk we've heard before, was what wasn't in the bill. No big cuts to Social Security taxes, despite some earlier promises or discussions we heard about.
That's a really key point. So while those broader tax cuts for Social Security benefits aren't in this draft, they are floating something else, a potential new tax deduction.
Oh, specifically for seniors.
Exactly, for seniors. Now, remember, people 65 and older already get a slightly higher standard deduction.
Right.
This would be another deduction kind of layered on top of that existing one.
Okay, interesting. So an extra break, who gets it? Are there, income limits or other strings attached?
Yes, definitely limits. It would start phasing out if your modified adjusted gross income, that's your AGI, basically goes above $75,000 for an individual.
Okay.
And for married couples filing jointly, that phase out starts at $150,000.
And this is just for a limited time.
Seems so.
Yep.
The proposal has it for tax years 2025 through 2028. And importantly, you'd need valid Social Security numbers, for yourself and your spouse if filing jointly.
Got it. So it's targeted. But back to the missing piece. Why weren't those bigger Social Security tax cuts included, if there was talk about it before?
Well, it really comes down to Senate procedure, something called the Byrd Rule.
Ah, the Byrd Rule.
Right.
Okay.
It basically prevents adding things to budget reconciliation bills that are considered extraneous, not strictly budgetary, and changes to Social Security usually fall into that category.
So it's a procedural roadblock for this type of bill.
Pretty much. It's designed to keep these budget bills focused, prevent major policy changes from getting slipped in without more debate.
Makes sense. But just thinking hypothetically, what if they did manage to end Social Security taxes someday? What would that actually do to the system's finances?
Oh, the impact would be huge, really significant. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, the CRFB, they estimated it could mean about $950 billion less revenue for Social Security.
Wow, $950 billion.
Yeah. And remember, the Social Security Administration itself, their trustees, projected just last year that without any changes, the trust funds might only cover about 83% of benefits starting around 2035. So we could see cuts around 17% potentially. Losing nearly $1 trillion in revenue would obviously make that situation much, much worse.
So those are some serious numbers. Given that this proposed senior deduction is the thinking maybe that it's a sort of smaller tax break for seniors since the bigger one isn't happening.
That's definitely one interpretation. Andrew Biggs over at the American Enterprise Institute, he suggested something like that. He framed it as a tax cut for seniors, maybe to, soften the blow of not getting that broader Social Security tax repeal.
Which Biggs himself thought was unaffordable anyway.
Right. He called it unaffordable and unnecessary. So yeah, maybe this deduction is seen as a more targeted, affordable way to give some tax relief to that group.
Okay. So this whole bill, Speaker Johnson called it the one big, beautiful bill. What are its chances, really, getting through Congress?
Well, Speaker Johnson is definitely framing it as delivering the America First agenda. But the path forward is tricky, very tricky.
Needs almost all Republicans in the House, I imagine.
Exactly. With that slim majority, they can't afford many defections. And even if it passes the House, then it goes to the Senate. And, who knows there? So definitely something to watch, but it's still very early days.
Okay. Let's pivot then. Let's talk about this other big piece of news, the change in the Social Security full retirement age. This sounds like it directly impacts a specific group.
It does. We're talking about the full retirement age, or FRA. That's the age, when you can get 100% of the benefit you've earned based on your record.
Right.
And for people born in 1959, that age is ticking up slightly. The change really starts to hit in November 2025.
So who exactly sees their FRA change? Just that one birth year?
Well, it's this specific change hitting people born in 1959. Their full retirement age becomes 66 years and 10 months.
Okay, 66 and 10 months. How does that compare?
If you were born just the year before, in 1958, Your FRA is 66 years and 8 months.
Ah, so it's a 2-month increase for the 59 cohort.
Exactly. And, if your birthday is late in 1959, say December, you won't actually reach that new FRA until October 2026.
It feels like these small steps have been happening for a while. Is this part of a bigger plan?
It is. This isn't new policy being made now. It's the result of changes Congress made way back in 1983.
Okay, 1983.
Yeah, they decided then to gradually raise the full retirement age from 65 up to 67. It was done over many years, kind of phasing it in based on birth year. The idea was to help shore up Social Security's finances, partly because people are living longer.
So this increase for those born in 59 is just the next step in that pre-planned schedule.
Precisely. And the schedule continues. If you were born in 1960 or any year after that, your FRA is already set at 67.
Okay, so what does this mean practically for someone born in 1959 who's nearing retirement age? What are the implications for claiming benefits?
Well, the biggest thing is if you're thinking about claiming before you hit that 66 and 10 months mark, you can still claim as early as 62. That hasn't changed.
But your benefit is lower, right?
Right, permanently lower. For someone born in 1959, claiming right at 62, the reduction is pretty significant. They get about 28% less each month compared to waiting for their full retirement age.
28%. That's a big chunk of change over potentially decades of retirement.
It really adds up. Of course, waiting until FRA gets you your full 100% benefit.
And what if you can wait even longer? Past 66 and 10 months.
Then your benefit actually grows. For every year you delay claiming past your FRA, up until age 70, you earn delayed retirement credits.
And those are worth quite a bit.
Yeah, they can boost your benefit by up to 8% per year. So delaying from, say, 66 and 10 months to age 70 can give you a substantially larger monthly check for the rest of your life. When you claim really matters.
So the FRA is going up to 67 for those born in 1960 and later. Is there any discussion about pushing it even higher than 67 down the road?
Currently, the law stops the increases at 67. That's the final step in the 1983 plan.
Okay.
To raise it further, Congress would have to pass new legislation. It's definitely an idea that gets floated in discussions about Social Security's long-term solvency, but nothing's been enacted. It would be a whole new debate.
So for our listeners born specifically in 1959, what's the main action item here?
Definitely check your exact full retirement age. The Social Security Administration website, ssa.gov, has a retirement age calculator. It's really easy to use.
Good tip.
And honestly, it's probably a good idea to talk with a retirement advisor if you can. They can help you figure out the best claiming strategy for your specific situation, looking at your health, savings, other income, all of that.
Sound advice. Okay, let's shift gears one more time. Let's talk about the QLA, the cost of living adjustment projected for 2026. Sounds like it might be a bit underwhelming compared to recent years.
Yeah, the early forecasts are pointing towards a potential COLA of around 2.4% for 2026.
2.4%.
And if that holds, it would actually be the smallest yearly increase beneficiaries have seen in 5 years.
How does that 2.4% compare to, say, this year's CLA or the one before?
Well, for 2025, the CLA was 2.5%, so slightly higher. And if you go back to 2021, it was only 1.3%.
Right, that was a low one.
It was. So 2.4% is, lower than this year, but not quite as low as 2021, kind of in between recent history.
Can you just quickly remind us how they calculate that number each year?
Sure. It's all based on inflation, specifically the change in the consumer price index for urban wage earners and clerical workers, the CPIW.
CPIW, got it.
They compare the average CPIW from the third quarter, that's July, August, September of one year, to the average from the third quarter of the previous year. The percentage increase becomes the CLA for the next year.
And if inflation is flat or goes down in that period,
then there's no CLA. Benefits wouldn't decrease, but they wouldn't increase either. A zero CLA is possible.
Okay. And what's the CPIW been doing lately?
The most recent data shows it's up 2.1% over the past 12 months. So that 2.1% increase kind of aligns with why the projections are hovering around that 2.4% mark for 2026.
Are there any wild cards? Things that could push that 2.4% number up or down before they announce the official figure?
Well, a couple of things are possible. Tariffs are one. If there are new or higher tariffs, that could push inflation higher, potentially boosting the CLA.
Interesting point.
On the flip side, you have things like President Trump's recent executive order aiming to lower prescription drug costs. Now, analysts like Mary Johnson don't think that will directly impact the CPIW calculation itself.
Right.
But if drug prices do come down for retirees, that obviously helps their personal budgets, even if the official COLA number doesn't reflect it directly.
So even a lower CLA percentage might be offset somewhat if other costs decrease for seniors.
Potentially, yes. It highlights that the CLA is just one piece of the financial puzzle for retirees.
And who's making this 2.4% projection right now?
That number comes from folks like Mary Johnson, the independent analyst we mentioned, and also the Senior Citizens League, which is a well-known advocacy group.
And AARP is also watching the drug price issue closely.
Yeah, Lee Purvis at AARP has spoken positively about efforts to lower drug costs, seeing it as beneficial for older adults' financial security.
So when do we find out the official number for 2026?
That usually comes out in October. The Social Security Administration announces it then after they have all the third quarter inflation data finalized.
Okay, so we'll keep an eye out for that in the fall. Lastly, let's just touch on something maybe a bit more fundamental. This idea of a flat benefit for Social Security. That sounds like a really different way of doing things.
It is a very different approach. Brett Aarons had a piece in MarketWatch recently talking about it, highlighting a proposal from Andrew Biggs again.
From AEI.
Yeah. And this idea isn't totally out of the blue. It borrows from systems in places like the UK, Australia, and New Zealand.
So what's the basic concept? A flat benefit.
The core idea is, instead of benefits being tied tightly to your specific earnings history, everyone retirees, disabled individuals would get a set, fixed dollar amount.
Regardless of what they earned.
Essentially, yes. Biggs has talked about setting it at maybe 125% or 150% of the federal poverty line. The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, has actually modeled what those kinds of systems might look like.
What would be the main goal of switching to something like that?
Proponents argue the biggest potential upside is drastically reducing poverty among seniors and the disabled, maybe even eliminating it.
How? By giving everyone that base amount.
Right. It achieves that by, well, reallocating funds within the system. You'd boost benefits significantly for lower earners compared to the current system, but you'd pay for that by reducing benefits for higher earners.
Reducing them by how much? Is there an example?
Yeah, the CBO's look at it suggested that, for instance, the highest earning 20% of households, maybe those born in the 1980s, could see their lifetime Social Security benefits cut by something like 58% under one of these flat benefit models.
Wow, 58%. That's a massive change for higher earners. What's the justification for that?
Well, the argument, as put forth by Biggs and others, is that the current system can end up paying very, very high benefits to people who are already high earners and likely have substantial private savings.
Okay.
He uses an example where, under current law, the richest fifth might average $100,000 a year from Social Security eventually. The argument is that really the core purpose of a social safety net program, to pay six figures to people who aren't at risk of poverty.
So it forces a conversation about what Social Security is fundamentally for. Is it poverty prevention or is it earnings replacement across the board?
Exactly. Biggs likes to ask, if you were designing Social Security from scratch today, what would you design it to do? It really frames that debate about the program's core mission.
That's definitely a different way to think about it compared to tweaking the current formulas.
It is. And while, a complete switch like that is probably a very long-term, complex discussion, understanding these alternative reform ideas is important as we think about how Social Security might evolve or needs to evolve for the future.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a really packed deep dive. We've covered that proposed spending bill, the potential tax impacts or lack thereof for Social Security. We looked at the full retirement age shift for those born in 59.
The projected 2026 COLA looking a bit lower, and this whole concept of a flat benefit reform.
Yeah, lots of moving parts and big ideas in play. So, considering all these potential changes and the ongoing debates, here's something for you, our listener, to think about. What do you believe is the most crucial principle we should prioritize when shaping the future of Social Security? Definitely something worth mulling over. Welcome to Financial Area. I'm Paul.
And I'm Rachel.
Today in Financial Area, we're doing a deep dive into some pretty important shifts happening around Social Security. Things that you, our listener, really should have on your radar.
Yeah, we'll be looking at a proposed Republican spending bill, for one thing. And there's a new rule about the full retirement age hitting soon.
Right, specifically if you were born in 1959. And we've also got the early projections for the 2026 cost of living adjustment, the COA.
So quite a bit to unpack. Where should we start?
Let's jump into that Republican spending bill first. It's pretty fresh, right, from the House Ways and Means Committee.
Exactly, just released. And, well, the big headline for a lot of folks is the $4 trillion proposed increase to the debt ceiling.
Okay.
But there's other stuff tucked in there, too, like extending some of those Trump-era